Hey everybody, this is technically session 11, but we're still doing the lesson number 10. We're still working off the document from session 10, but this video is for session 11. In session 11, we really reviewed the homework that we got from session 10. So in session 10, we went through this first part of word meanings and talked about words have multiple meanings. We have to figure out from the context what's the right meaning. And we talked a little bit about etymology, the origin of a word, and how words change over time. They have a historical development. They kind of mature. And we have to make sure we're understanding the word at its point in time usage. And we talked a little bit about study aids. And then we got into our homework assignment. Sorry, I had to take a quick pause there. Got a phone call. So when we finished up session 10, we did not get into synonyms and antonyms. That's actually what will be tonight's session that we're going to be doing tonight in group. And I'm hoping to record that even before I go to group. But we're going to cover synonyms and antonyms, the notion of cross-references, and this law of first mention we'll cover tonight in group. But coming out of this, you had a homework assignment. And so we really spent all of session 11 going through the homework assignment. And that's kind of what I want to cover now. So I'm going to minimize the document. And this is my result of the homework. So I too do the homework each week, and this is the result, my efforts of that. And as you'll recall from the prior video, session 10, we were to create a spreadsheet listing out, right? We did our search in Blue Letter Bible, where we were looking for the word reward, rewards, rewarding, or rewarded. And we found 62 occurrences across 61 verses, and we were to go through, we had to export these into the Excel spreadsheet, creating this list here below. And then we had to go through them one by one to create these definitions. And this is called a domain key. Right? The goal is just using our own mind and the context of the passage to identify all the different ways that our particular word, reward or rewarded, so forth, is being utilized throughout all of its uses in the Bible, right? All 62 occurrences, how are they being used? And then in class, we went through everybody's domain list here, and I had 15, one gentleman had 14, some had 5 or 6, some had 7 or 8. A handful of guys weren't there, so hopefully maybe tonight we can catch up with them. But the point is, even though we had differences and we didn't all quite define these things the same way, right? That's an issue of refinement and further work and effort. The point is, none of us had only one definition of that word. We all had multiple definitions of that word. And so, if we just kind of take a look at some of the definitions that I came up with, something that is given, like an inheritance, a promise, etc., by God in exchange for faithful obedience to what God has required, which is righteous living. It may involve judgment as well. This was my most frequent occurrence. I had 20 that fell into that domain. And then there were things like something given by God in exchange for how one works and cares for others. Something given by God in exchange for an act of love or righteousness. So this top one has more to do with a kind of a pattern of works and caring for others versus a specific act of love or righteousness. Then there was also some negative connotations, something given by God in exchange for an evil or unrighteous act, right? That an unrighteous act was rewarded, just like a righteous act was rewarded. So same concept of recompense for type of work. Something given by one person to another person for work done or for a prior kind of gesture, right? That's different than something God gives. Then there's a negative concept of repayment for a perceived act of unrighteousness. A negative concept of repayment for a life lived unrighteously. a negative concept of repayment based on a misunderstanding, that is, without cause, something given by God to his beloved, no mention of it being earned. It doesn't really indicate anything other than they are his beloved, so that would imply they're living righteously. Something received as a result of work done, that is a day's wage for a day's work. We're talking act like a job, working in the field kind of thing. The enjoyment of one's labor or one's life, right? This is more not a physical thing, but an emotional thing. A share in life lived. The reward is related to getting a share in living life. In other words, you get to stay alive, kind of thing. Something gained by deceitful or unrighteous means. So you've been rewarded, you've gained something, but you've done that by deceitful or unrighteous means. Future compensation by God of present day work or persecution. For the work you're doing now and the persecution you're experiencing now, there's going to be a future compensation by God. And then an earthly repayment in a negative sense via recognition from others. This is all of those don't fast, don't pray, don't give in front of others to be seen by others, because if you do, you have your reward. In other words, you're receiving an earthly payment for that by the recognition of others. When somebody else recognizes that effort that you've done, that is your reward, which is a much lesser reward, obviously, than if we do those things in secret, in which our Heavenly Father will reward us. That's the future compensation one. And so once you've created all this, you can then add them up, right? So all of my letter A's go into row 2 here, and I can see that I had 20 of those. And I get a sense then of kind of how the word reward is being utilized across the text. And I can even then come down here and sort, which I have already done, my list, so that now all of my A's are together. Sorry, I don't want to move it. All of my A's are showing up together. Now I actually had a couple, as did some other people in the group, that I thought were a combination, that were some related to righteousness and some related to the negative. So it was live righteously, receive a good recompense. Live unrighteously, receive a bad recompense. And that was in one verse. So in this way, we can now easily see, the passages that are using a given definition of that word. And so all we did in our session was kind of go through all of the different spreadsheets and kind of look at how people did this. We talked about these different definitions, and we saw the patterns that we each kind of saw. Even though we had different numbers of definitions, we were able to quickly see that we all saw, for example, that there was a positive recompense and a negative recompense. We all saw that some of it was in present day and some of it was future tense. So there were certain patterns that were very easy for us to pick out. And of course, the point of all of this, again, is to highlight the fact that words have meanings, plural. And in order to understand what is the right meaning of a word in a given context, you first need to understand what are all of the options. This is the domain of that word, the domain of meaning. So all of these different nuances are the different domains for that word. And so if I'm looking at that word in a given passage, in order for me to say, well, it really means, a negative concept of repayment for a life lived unrighteously, well, I have to know that that is one of the options. And the way to know that that is one of the options is to do this type of word study. Now, of course, our temptation is to go right to a lexicon or a dictionary or some kind of an encyclopedia, a theological dictionary or theological encyclopedia, assuming somebody else has already done this work. And to a large extent, they have. But you really need to be able to understand this process and perform it on your own so that you have the direct confidence, the direct hands-on experience with this process to say, look, I've done this work. I know how that word is being used. I know every occurrence of that word. I know the different nuances of how it's being used. And out of all of those options, I think, this option is the right option for this passage because it fits the context the best. That's the idea. All right, so this will be a really short video because I just wanted to kind of talk about what we did with the homework and kind of show my end result. You can see ultimately, that if I just keep scrolling down to the bottom, all we've done is categorize, and then I sorted based on the domain letter over here so that I have all of these now in order. And then what I recommended to the group last week as kind of homework for tonight's session is that this is the first cut, right? This is the first draft of this. So from here, what you would then typically do after you've done your own legwork here, then you would come over and start doing some dictionary research using things like lexicons and Vine's dictionary and so forth. Now, Blue Letter Bible has a handful of dictionaries. And so I came back to Blue Letter Bible and I just did our normal search, just like we'd done before, got the same list, just like we had exported. But now I'm going to click on the Dictionaries tab. Now, this is going to load a handful of different resources that we can use for this. We're already familiar with the Vine's expository dictionary, so we could look it up in there. But we can also see here we've got this ISB, International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. So these tend to give us more like articles about that particular word. Or we have a topical Bible or a thematic subject guide. Lots of different ways to look at this word. So if we just look at the encyclopedia usage for it, so this just gives us a little more color. Reward. In modern English, except when influenced by the biblical forms, a reward is something given in recognition of a good act, although we know it also means a bad act. In English versions of the Bible, however, reward is used quite generally for anything given, and the term covers the recompense of evil, right? Wages, bribes, and gifts. The Revised Version has specialized the meaning in a number of classes, but not systematically. So we can see that aligns with what we saw, in our results. We can come in and look at it from Naves. Now, so all this is really doing is giving us some similar words, so we can get a sense of it. Contingent upon obedience, blessing that's contingent upon obedience, punishments, righteous promises to, sin that separates, wicked, the punishment of the wicked. And then these are really passages that have that in there. Let's see what else if we come into the thematic. So all of these are just going to be, right, a little bit of further explanation, a showing of mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. So these are all passages that where it's used, not rendering evil for evil. So you can see that it's giving kind of a commentary style description. Probably the best one in here. Well, let's just take a look at this one. All right, so just a brief descriptions, the different types of rewards. Right, being with Christ, beholding the face of God, beholding the glory of Christ. This is good to see the different types of rewards that may be mentioned. Right, so like here, for example, this Peter passage doesn't use the word reward, but it's talking about something that will be given. So this can kind of help us expand our understanding of the different types of rewards. We can see all the different types of rewards that this has listed. And then Vines, of course, is good for just understanding that definition. Wages, higher, and then generally reward. Received in this life, received in the next life. Right, to get back, so translated to reward. So the idea is just to do further reading and research on this. And you can use some of these dictionaries to help accomplish that. The lexicons, These are a bit more complex as they, again, a lexicon is a dictionary of an ancient language. And so in this case, we would...
I speak fluent English and conversational Pig Latin. My accent is atrocious, but it's good enough to keep me from getting lost in Pig Lagu.
Alexa, stop listening. Sorry for that brief interruption. I must have said something that had caused her to think I was talking to her, which of course I was not. So here, for example, we can see the Hebrew words when we're looking in a lexicon. We can see the Hebrew words for reward and the, let's see, got to find the Greek. There we go. Some of the Greek words they're used for it, mistos being the most common one for it, but you could do some Greek study on the word as well, just to see what are the different Greek variations that the English word reward is translated into. So I just suggested that you do a little bit more homework using dictionaries, using lexicons, and then potentially come back and refine your domains. Sometimes you will end up consolidating this, thinking that some of these are really pretty similar, so we can put them together. And the goal is to get to the most concise list of these definitions as possible without losing any of the meaning. That's a great way to perform word studies when we're talking about the meanings and understanding the many types of meanings, or the domain of the meanings. So that'll be it for this video. Tonight we'll be talking about the antonyms and synonyms, and I hope to have that video created shortly here as well.